cultivate our motivation. Again, feeling really joyful that we have this opportunity to hear the Dharma. Because not so many people have that opportunity. And so it's rare. It's even rare for us to have the opportunity. And it's an opportunity that's so beneficial, that has ramifications not just for ourselves, but for others. And not just on this life, but for all future lives. And so let's approach what we're about to do with a sense of joy and gratitude and a determination to use this fortune for the highest purpose, to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we have this life, and there's so many exciting things we can do in it, can't we? We can go here, we can go there, we can study this topic, we can study that topic, we can meet all sorts of interesting people and see all sorts of movies and learn all sorts of jazzy things and listen to all kinds of music and travel around the world. And it all seems terribly exciting and wonderful, doesn't it? And does any of it have any essence? Does doing any of that produce anything of long-term value? Only if we have a bodhicitta motivation. And a genuine bodhicitta motivation, not a fake one that's rationalizing what we're doing. So it's real important for us to think about what has meaning and essence in our life and what doesn't. Because if we don't think about this, and we're just pulled here and there, attracted by this and that, you know, off to see this, off to do that, then pretty soon we're dying, which is the great adventure of our life, and we haven't even packed our suitcase for that one, because we've been too busy packing our suitcase for all the other fancy things we're going off to do. Okay, so it's very important that no matter what we're doing, we have an attitude of bodhicitta, and to have bodhicitta in the mind, we have to have some renunciation. It's absolutely imperative, because if we don't wish ourselves to be free of samsara, how in the world are we going to wish anybody else? You know, if we can't understand that everything we have contact with is the truth of suffering, you know, if we can't understand that, how are we going to understand that in relationship to everybody else and wish them to be free of it? Okay? So this is quite powerful, you know, when we really look around and think, everything I have contact with, my whole body, my whole mind, every external object, every person I meet, except if we happen to know some Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or Arhats. But aside from that, everything else is the first noble truth, or the second noble truth. Truth of dukkha, truth of the origin of dukkha. Okay? So somehow, you know, we feel that dukkha, suffering, and the origin of dukkha, the origin of suffering, that there's something out there. You know, it's like, I'm here, and I'm not suffering. I'm not the first noble truth. You know, I'm kind of here protected, because after all, I'm me. And the first noble truth is something out there that's, afflicting me. But my body, my mind, they aren't the first noble truth. You want to make a bet? That's actually, one of the definitions of the First Noble Truth, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. Okay? So the things that we cling on to, that's why they're called subject to clinging. And also because how did our body and mind come about? They came about through clinging, through grasping, through craving. That's how we got this body and mind. But we never look at it that way. It's like, how did I get this body and mind? Well, my parents did something. Well, that was craving, wasn't it? But that was their craving. Okay, that's not my craving. But how was it that this consciousness was born in this body? It's because the mind was overwhelmed by craving. And we had done karma. We had created karma that was, pushed on by craving in some way. So the craving from the karma, the craving at the moment of death, craving, for a new life, here we are, And this very body and mind that we're trying to use to get free of suffering and the causes of suffering are suffering and the causes of suffering. Yeah? So samsara isn't somewhere out there. This is samsara. Okay? So if we don't have an understanding of that, and we're somehow thinking, well, I'm just okay, there's samsara, and yeah, we want to be free of it and all that. And I want other people to be free of it because they're all really mighty confused. Yeah, and I get confused once in a while too, but I'm not nearly as bad as those other people. They're really confused. Yeah, I'm just superficially confused. Yeah, so if we have that kind of attitude, how are we going to have genuine bodhicitta? Because we're not even wanting ourselves to be free. And we can't want ourselves to be free because we can't even see what samsara is to want to be free of it. Yeah? So this is, it's a really serious situation. And we just kind of, well, Dharma's kind of nice hobby, but gee, if I can find something better, I'll go for it. Yeah? Okay, it's just something really to keep in mind. The relationship between real renunciation and the determination to be free and bodhicitta. Yeah? And how all that ties in with really being able to be honest with ourselves and see what samsara is and actually admit what it is. Because it's scary when you think about it, It's really scary. And it cuts through the ignorance that just kind of feels that, well, I'm safe and I'm protected and everything is going along and other people die and other people get sick and other people get in accidents, but not me. Okay, so it kind of really cuts through that, doesn't it? Really cuts it. And it's so interesting because no matter how much suffering we've experienced, as soon as we go through it and pull out of it, we're back stuck in our ignorance, feeling like it's never going to happen to me again. It only happens to other people. You mentioned that before, and it really struck me. Yeah? It's like sometimes when we're really in pain, oh yeah, samsara sucks. And then we feel better. Samsara's fun. There's all sorts of new, exciting things to do. Yeah. It's really kind of amazing. And this is ignorance. This is ignorance. When we talk about being blinded by ignorance, this is it. We can't even see what ignorance is because we're so blinded by the ignorance. Okay, and it's not only us, it's everybody. Yeah, and so it's all these beings who have been our mother in previous lives and who have been kind to us. Yeah, and it's all of them as well as us. Yeah, so there's no reason to hold ourselves as being any different than anybody else. Yeah, no reason for it all. Because we're all totally 100% in the same boat. But we've had the fortune to meet the Dharma, so we have a responsibility. Yeah, we have an extra joy, and with that extra joy comes an extra responsibility. Yeah, or I remember His Holiness one time when he was talking about things, he was saying, oh, I know, it was when he was talking about nuns, that nuns have should have equal privilege in the Dharma, and that means you also have equal responsibility. So it's with privilege comes responsibility. So if we have the privilege of having met the Dharma, we have the responsibility to be able to benefit others through it. Okay, so we have some questions this time. So Karen asked, is there any difference between negativities, such as the ones we purified with doing the Dorji Kadra fire puja at the end of the retreat, and the seeds of negative, unwholesome, unvirtuous actions, for which we do purification practices like the Vajrasattva, and the 35 Buddhas, or are they the same thing? So I wasn't sure in her question if she's talking about the difference between negativities and the seeds of non-virtuous karma, or if she's talking about the difference between what you purify doing Dorji Kadra and what you purify doing Vajrasattva and what you purify doing 35 Buddhas. So I'll answer both. Okay? So the difference between negativities and seeds of negative karma, okay, negativities include unwholesome or non-virtuous mental factors. Okay? Whereas the seeds of negative karma are the seeds of karma. They aren't, there's also seeds of the afflictions, but they're different than the seeds of karma. Okay, because karma are actions, afflictions are mental factors. Okay, so when we use the word negativity, it includes the unwholesome karmas and it includes the non-virtuous mental factors. Okay? Yeah?
Not the manifest unwholesome mental factors.
That's all, the manifest and the seeds, yeah, the whole thing's included in negativity. But negative karmic seed is a subcategory, a more limited thing. Okay? Then in terms of what we purify by doing different purification practices, it said that 35 Buddhas is especially good for purifying the bodhisattva vows and other negativities, and Vajrasattva is especially good for purifying transgression of the tantric vows as well as other negativities. Okay, and then of course we do other purification practices like Dorji Kadra or any of the visualizations we do, the four opponent powers. So it's important to remember in this that it isn't just like doing a sadhana that's the purification, it's applying the four opponent powers to the mind that's doing the purification. Okay? Because otherwise you just recite a sadhana, blah, 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 but if the mind doesn't change and we're not actually going through the four opponent powers, okay, regret, making a determination not to do it again, taking refuge in generating bodhicitta, and then the remedial action. If we're not doing that, then we don't have the complete four opponent powers. So that's real important to remember. Now, some texts have the four opponent powers in them. If you look at the 35 Buddhas, four opponent powers are right there. So it's the same in Vajrasattva. Okay? But we may do other things as the remedial action, like making offerings, offering service, doing things like this. So that's the remedial action, but we need to make sure that the other three parts are there as well for it to be purification. Okay? Then Cheryl had some questions too. Okay. I'll just read what she said because it's quite interesting that she had a comment first. She said, I've been meditating and thinking about the teachings on karma, and many questions continue to arise. The teachings have been very useful for me to further examine my own habitual behaviors, particularly in thinking about anger, karma, and impermanence, as I could be out of here at any moment, and in what state of mind do I want to die? Good reflection. It just brings it home even more that there is no time to waste for me or anyone else, and that it is a good reason to really consider how my actions may influence someone else to get angry or engage in any of the other destructive actions or thoughts. So really thinking not only how she creates negative karma, but how her actions and behavior can trigger afflictions in other people that cause them to create negative karma. So that's the development of compassion within her, that she's caring about the karma that other people may create. Okay, then her questions. I was thinking about the karmic results for students in their actions towards their own teachers. So the question arose about what about the weight and results of a teacher's actions towards their student? I'm wondering which she spent more time thinking about. The karma she creates in relationship to her teachers, or the karma her teachers create in relationship to her. Would it be heavier, the teacher's karma be heavier because of the responsibilities to which a teacher has committed? And would it be heavier for Buddhist teachers because of the multiple lifetimes view, as opposed to teachers from other spiritual traditions that are only thinking of this one life, or for a teacher of worldly subjects? Okay, so it's much more interesting to think about the karma other people would create in relationship to me, because they better create only virtuous karma in relationship to me. But us think about the karma we create in relationship with our teachers. We don't want to think about that one. Okay, but anyway, to answer her question, well, in the teachings, it always emphasizes our relationship with our teachers. Okay, and why that is important is because they're the people who lead us on the path. And so if we create negative karma in relationship to the people who lead us on the path, it's like we're pushing them away, aren't we? Because what's negative karma coming from? It's coming from a deluded mind. It's coming from anger and ignorance and greed. It's coming from self-centeredness. So when we create negative karma in relationship with our teachers, we're pushing them away. Yeah, and so that becomes like pushing away the path to enlightenment. And that's why that karma is so heavy. That's why that karma is so damaging for us. Okay. Now, in terms of teachers, spiritual teachers, yeah, of course, you have responsibility to somebody else. And actually, any of us who are Dharma practitioners, and especially monastics, where we're visible as Dharma practitioners, then we have a responsibility to the people who see us, because people look at us and fairly or unfairly, we become symbols of hope for them. And if we misbehave, it breaks that trust and it could cause them to lose faith in the Dharma. And that's very bad for them and therefore very bad for us, because our poor behavior caused them to lose faith in the Dharma. So it's a similar thing if somebody is a spiritual leader and other people are looking up to them as something they want to become, as some symbol of hope in this world, and then that spiritual leader just creates all sorts of negative karma, and does all sorts of negative things, then, we've had enough scandals in this country, haven't we, to know how that affects people and how it really makes people lose faith, lose hope, and it's a really very sad situation. So I think, yeah, people have a responsibility when you're in that position. Yeah. That's what His Holiness said, along with the privilege comes the responsibility. Yeah. Okay. I would think teachers in schools also, they have responsibility towards their students too. Yeah, especially if they're students or kids. Little kids don't know so well between virtue and non-virtue, but adults sure do, and so they have a responsibility there. But of course, nobody's perfect, are they? Except the Buddha. Yeah. As for the rest of us, we're hobbling along there. Okay, next question. One of the factors in the ripening of karma is the conducive circumstances, right? Because I was talking about, that for a seed to ripen, you need water and fertilizer. So for karma to ripen, we need the circumstances around us in our life. So are those circumstances themselves that we find ourselves in due to ripening karma, as well as our experience we have in that circumstance? And so she gave the example here of being in a bar, which is the circumstance. Is that a result of our karma? And that we get mugged in the bar, which is, that's the result of karma. But is the being in the bar, which set the stage for being mugged, is that also a result of karma? Okay, so karma will play a factor in that, in the conditions, but the conditions also depend on our state of mind, because we were the ones who chose to go to the bar. Okay, so that intention to go to the bar is our intention, and whatever afflicted mind was motivating it, that's our affliction. And so having those mental thoughts, and then of course we must have had some karma that made it possible for us to get to the bar, because if we didn't, the car would have broken down, or something would have happened. We would not have been able to get to the bar. But then once having gotten to the bar, and then the mind that starts drinking, that mind is not karma. That mind is our mind. It's the afflicted mind. Okay, and so doing that behavior with that kind of mind puts us in a circumstance where it's very easy for negative karma to ripen. Okay? So yeah, karma's involved, but a lot of the thing has to do with the mental state we're in and the choices we're making at that very moment. Okay? And then her third question was, when something big happens to someone, I've heard people say things like, that was just their karma. And her question is, but aren't we experiencing karmic results every moment? You bet we are, Yeah, we're experiencing karmic results, almost every moment here. But people sometimes only realize it when there's some big event, But then you can't just dismiss the big event by saying, well, that's their karma. His Holiness sometimes says that you hear people say a lot, oh, that's their karma, that's their karma, that's, why did that happen? Oh, that's karma. He says, when we say that, it's as if we mean, I don't know. Why did that happen? I don't know. It's their karma. So he says, you can't just kind of brush things off saying it's their karma, it's their karma. That you have to really look at what was the mind involved in that action, and what were actions done in previous lives, motivated by the mind that the people are experiencing the results of. So things are very complex situations. We tend to want to make things extremely simple, and like there's one karma that's ripening and that's it, or one cause for something. It's not, I mean, even in science, you study biology or chemistry or any of the sciences, they always talk about multiple causes and conditions and interplays of many factors. And so when we talk about karma ripening, it's the same kind of thing. It's an interplay of many, many different factors and conditions there. And we are experiencing the result of karma all the time. We're here listening to teachings tonight. Well, that's a result of karma. We created the karma to be able to come to the teachings, but it's also a result of what we were thinking today, or what we thought a year ago that made that decision to come live at the Abbey. And then when you're here at the Abbey, you don't sometimes even generate the motivation to go to teachings. You just find yourself here, okay? So that's why we always start with creating our motivation, because sometimes we just, are a bunch of sheep and follow the schedule, and, why am I at the teachings? Well, no, it's what everybody else is doing, So we have to generate our motivation. But we did create a virtuous motivation that wanted to move to the Abbey, okay? So that got us here to start with, which is good. Yeah, it's really very important, because sometimes when you live and breathe Dharma like this, sometimes you just take everything for granted, and your motivation just kind of, you stop having a strong motivation because you're just surrounded by it all the time, and so you don't feel like it's anything special, or that you have to do anything special with your mind while you're enjoying the Dharma. Okay. So those were the questions. Let's go back to our section on karma here. Okay, so one thing to say is that sometimes in different sutras or different texts, we'll read about stories about karma, and some of them may seem really extreme in our mind. And we have to realize that sometimes the way these stories are told, they're told as moral injunctions, moral injunctions. And so they're told in a certain way to get a big point across to people, and not all the subtleties are brought in. Okay? And so just because we sometimes hear these stories, and Westerners, we take things very literally, and so then we go, how's that possible? Okay? Like I was just reading a story recently, let me see if I can remember it. Can never get the details right, but I think it was like at the time of the Buddha, one monk went with the other monks to bathe, and he couldn't swim, so he didn't go in the water, but the other monks went in the water, and they were kind of enjoying themselves as they were bathing. And so he thought, oh, they're having such a good time, like a bunch of ducks, And just because of thinking that making the monastics, comparing the monastics to ducks, it said that he was born 500 times as a duck. Okay? So, you hear things like that. Then we go, wait a minute, that seems rather strange, that just making a comment like that in jest could cause 500 rebirths as a duck. I think that the point here is, don't call people names, and don't compare people to things that are, lower states, okay? But if you look, can that one action alone, without any other karma, cause somebody to be born as a duck 500 times? I don't think so, you know, because I think there also has to be an action with the 4 parts complete, a negative karma with the 4 parts complete. And so that has to be there, you know, and then you add this negative karma on top of it, okay, then you get that rebirth. But just that kind of offhand karma alone without any other factors, I think is not quite accurate. Okay? So when we hear stories like this, we have to realize that it's said for a particular purpose. And we should definitely understand, yeah, we don't call people names and we don't compare them to things like that. Okay? But we don't have to take all of that 100% literally. Okay? Similarly, sometimes you hear in the sutras, if you recite this mantra one time, you'll never be born in the lower realm. Well, hey, you know, then none of us should have any fear of being born in the lower realm. And, you know, which means if we have no fear of being born in the lower realm, we must have attained the patience part of the path of preparation, which means we're pretty far advanced already. Well, no. Okay, it's just a way of encouraging us to recite that mantra, saying that it's something very virtuous. And if you have a bunch of other factors together, you won't be born in the lower realms. But just saying that mantra once with our ordinary spaced out mind doesn't mean you'll never be born in the lower realms. Okay? So, just to have that clear in the mind. Okay? Then another thing about it is that the results of negative karma, with the exception of the habitual corresponding result, okay, so the habitual tendency to do the action again, with the exception of that, the other 3 results, the results themselves are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Okay? Because taking rebirth, whether you're born in a higher realm or a lower realm, okay, the body mind you take as a result of karma is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Okay? Is this body virtuous or non-virtuous? It's the result, okay, the human body is a result of tainted virtue, but the body itself is not non-virtuous. Okay? It's important because otherwise, you know, we can really get into some kind of screwy way of thinking. Yeah. Similarly, last time we were talking about the environmental results that you're born into. If you're born in a place with a lot of stones and rocks and thorns, is that place non-virtuous? No. It's just a place. Okay. So the cause to be born there might have been non-virtuous, but the result itself isn't. Okay? So the same thing with the body that we take. Yeah. The body, the rebirth, is not virtuous and not non-virtuous, but it could be the result of virtue or non-virtue. Okay, and then similarly, the corresponding result in terms of the experience, you know, for example, receiving praise or receiving criticism, those words and hearing those sounds, that's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. It's a result of virtue or non-virtue. But it itself, is that sound virtuous or non-virtuous? When you hear praise and those sounds are coming in your ear, are those sounds virtuous? No, they're just sounds. Are they non-virtuous when you're getting criticized? No. The person saying them may have a virtuous or non-virtuous mind. We may have created virtue or non-virtue that's causing us to hear them, but the sounds themselves are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Okay? Are you getting what I'm saying? Yeah? Yeah? So that's why this is very un-Catholic. I know you're struggling with it.
The body one is so interesting. This really points it up. I could just see that thinking right there.
Yeah.
About the environment, I could be okay. About the body, it's like, no, that's bad.
Yeah. I saw, as soon as I said that, your face went like, what are you talking about? This body's evil. The body's bad.
It's such an ingrained
No. It's just a body. Yeah. You can use it for virtuous, non-virtue.
It helps thinking of it like an environment, because I can see it clearly there.
Exactly, yeah.
Place, the stickery place by
Right.
itself, it's just a place.
Yeah, right,
So by itself, it's just a body.
right. So it's just a body. And what's the difference between your body and that external place? They're both made of atoms and molecules, aren't they? In fact, they're both made of the same atoms and molecules. They have different organic substances arranged in different ways, but those organic substances aren't virtue and they aren't non-virtue. Yeah. Actually, today, in the thing I was going over today, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but it's very interesting and I really liked it. I was reading in one of the Pali Suttas about how you meditate on the four elements to realize selflessness. So one of the ways to meditate is to take like the earth element, for example. Okay, so the earth element, we're not talking about particles of earth. We're talking about the quality of being hard or being resistant. Okay, so there's earth element in our body. There's some of the organs in our body that have more, where the earth element is prominent, like skin and bones and teeth and muscles and anything that's hard and solid and resistant in our body. Okay, so that's called the internal earth element. Then there's the external earth element, the quality of being hard and resistant in the rocks, in the ice, the bricks, the stones, everything there. Okay. Now the question comes, why, when the earth element is in relationship to this body, do we generate so much clinging and attachment to it? And why do we consider the earth element in this body I and mine and myself? Why? Because it's no different from the earth element that is outside of our body. And in fact, the earth element in our body used to be the earth element outside of our body. Because, in the plants and the vegetables, okay, every day we pull some vegetables out of the refrigerator, so there's the earth element, that aspect of being hard and so on, in the vegetables and the tofu. Yeah, so there's the earth element there. When there's the earth element in the vegetables and tofu, we don't cling on to as I and mine. Okay, but after we eat it and it gets integrated in our body, then we hold it onto it as I and mine. But then when the earth element gets excreted the next morning, then it's no longer I and mine. Isn't that very peculiar, the way our mind thinks about the earth element? Because it's all just the earth element, whether it's internal or external. So there's nothing about it that is I or mine. So when you go through each element in your body, earth, water, fire, air, and remember, we're not talking about particles here, we're talking about properties or qualities, we'll see that none of these things are I and mine, and they're always interchanging with the outer ones, which we definitely don't take as ourselves. So why do we take the inner ones as ourself? Why do we think of this body sometimes as I, or sometimes as mine? And then so much clinging and craving and grasping to it. It's really ridiculous, isn't it? Because it's just earth element, fire element, water element, air element, same as the elements outside the body. Okay? So all those elements, they're not virtuous, they're not non-virtuous. And they're not I and mine either. Yeah. So generating all these kinds of opinions and emotions based on our body, it's really, you can see it's all just wrong conception mind. All just totally wrong conception mind. Okay. Okay. Then, okay, we talked about cooperative conditions. Okay, then in terms of which karma is going to ripen sooner, okay? Vasubandhu wrote a verse. It's in his auto commentary on the to the Treasury of Knowledge, and it says, actions cause fruition in cyclic existence. First the heavy, then the proximate, then the accustomed, and then what was done before. Okay? So actions cause fruition in cyclic existence. Yeah? Then, so first the heavy actions will ripen. So especially at the time of death, if there's a heavy karma that we have in our mind stream, it's very easy for that one to ripen first because it's a very weighty karma. Then if there's two karmas that are equally as weighty, then the one that was created closest to the time of death will be the one that will ripen. That's the meaning of then the proximate. So first the heavy, then the proximate. Okay, so first the heavy karma, if there's two that are equal, then the one that was created most recently. Okay? Then, if there's no especially heavy karma, yeah, or if the proximity is the same, then whatever karma we're most accustomed to, so whatever action has been done most repetitively. Yeah, the thing. So here's where we see that, having a daily schedule and doing the same thing every day that includes certain virtuous things, here you really see the advantage of it. Yeah, because you're creating that habitual energy, and that will make that karma ripen faster if you're doing something virtuous. If you habitually get angry and lose your temper and shout at people, then very easy for that to ripen soon because you're familiar with it. And then the last line, then what was done before. We're not totally clear on the meaning of that line. That might mean what was done earlier, but it's something that I want to check on. Okay. And then we have the whole topic of karma getting destroyed or not being able to ripen. Yeah. And so this applies to both positive karma and negative karma. So negative karma can be purified by means of the four opponent powers. And so at first when we purify, we just diminish the force of the negative karma. Yeah. And then as we purify more and more, we impede the ability of that karma to be able to ripen. So there's one thing here. Yeah. So diminish means the result becomes less and the duration is shorter. Okay, but not all the, here we're talking about, let me talk in terms of positive karma, okay? Because sometimes we say, okay, the negative karma is destroyed by purification practice. Positive karma is destroyed by anger and wrong views or distorted views. So there's the questions of Upali Sutra. Okay, speaks of a case in which a monastic with pure behavior, a monastic with pure behavior holds ill will for another monastic with pure conduct. So both of them have pure conduct, but one doesn't like the other one. And so this text says that the one who holds ill will, his great roots of virtue are diminished, thoroughly reduced, and completely consumed. Okay? So there's 3 levels there. Yeah? Diminish means the result of the virtue becomes less, so it's not as strong. The duration of the happy result is shorter. Okay, but not all the good effects are destroyed. Okay, reduce, the second term, means that it can only bring a small pleasant result. So it's really getting incapacitated. And then if the anger or the ill will in this case was very strong, then the virtue is consumed, which means that the result can't ripen at all. Okay, so it's going to be the same for positive karma that we purify, or positive karma that we destroy with anger and distorted views, and non-virtuous karma that we destroy by purification. We can diminish it, then reduce it, and then consume the effect. Okay, depending on if we're doing purification, how strong our purification is. And then if it's the case of virtuous karma, that's getting diminished, reduced, and consumed, how strong our anger was, how much we're stuck in our distorted views. Okay, that will influence it as well. Okay, so we have to be careful of these things, because otherwise we work really hard to create virtue, and then we get angry, or we generate wrong views, and, we're just self-sabotaging ourselves. And so this is, where it's really helpful to see the detrimental effects of anger. Yeah, because the anger doesn't hurt the other person. The anger destroys our own virtue, so it hurts us. So, when we see that very clearly, then when anger starts to arise, we just say to ourselves, it's not worth it. I've worked too hard to create my virtue. Getting mad right now is just not worth it. Yeah, I am not going to destroy my virtue by ruminating on this, by harping on this, by making a big deal about this. It's just not worth it. Okay? So that can become a very helpful way to think when the mind starts having a lot of afflictions. Yeah. Okay. So, anything else? Any questions about anger? Yeah.
With negative karma and purification, pretty clear that you purify a specific karma, and you try to work through that when successful. But with the destroying a virtuous karma, it's kind of like just a bag thing. Like you just get angry, and then which karma gets destroyed?
Okay.
Karma, whichever one just pops up.
Oh, okay. So you're saying when we're doing purification, we're often confessing specific actions, and so our antidote is directed against specific things. The antidote also hits all the karma. We need to think when we're doing purification, all my negative karma, and especially these. Don't just think these few. Think all of them, and especially these. It's like when you're spraying knapweed, all the knapweed, but especially that big one that happened to grow right here where it shouldn't have. Okay? So like that. So then your question is, but with distorted views and anger, that you're not targeting them consciously targeting them against a specific positive karma, so is everything up for grabs? Kinda. Yeah. So.
How does it decide which one you lose?
You have to ask the Buddha how it gets decided, which one gets destroyed, because they say that level of detail is beyond the capacity of us limited beings. Okay. So when you become a Buddha, then you tell us, okay? Yeah.
So if we start habituating our minds to dedicating our virtuous activity numerous times during the day, does that indeed safeguard the virtue from the
Okay.
anger and the wrong?
Okay. So if we get in the habit of dedicating our virtue numerous times, does that safeguard the virtue from anger and wrong views? Now there's some discussion about this, okay? And I have yet to get it clarified, and I hear different things from different people, okay? And I hear different things in different situations, because whenever they're teaching the 7-limb prayer and they teach about dedicating, they always teach about, you know, if you dedicate, your virtue won't get destroyed by anger and wrong views. Okay, but when they teach Shantideva chapter 6, when they're talking about the mathematics of destroying virtue, because there's a whole discussion about how many eons of virtue get destroyed by how many moments of anger. In that, it seems like having dedicated doesn't matter. You know, now there's one sutra that says that virtue won't be exhausted. If you dedicate your virtue for full enlightenment, it won't be exhausted until, you know, all sentient beings attain enlightenment. Yeah? So if you dedicate it like that, then it, you know, it doesn't get exhausted. But then one Geshe told me, but that doesn't mean it won't get destroyed beforehand by your anger. But then I'm thinking, but if it won't get exhausted, how can it get destroyed? So this is one of the things that I don't have a lot of clarity about. But in any case, dedicating repeatedly is something that's very good, and it certainly won't help. Yeah, because it generates a lot of positive aspiration, and it really steers the karma to ripen in a good way. So it certainly can't help. Whether it has the... Oh, yes, thank you. It certainly can't hurt. Yeah. Now, whether it can protect the negative karma from ever getting destroyed by anger or wrong views, that I can't say. Okay, I don't know.
When we're talking about which karmas would ripen first,
Mm-hmm.
are you referring to ripening and rebirth, or just in general kind of the ripening of karma?
Oh, okay, so let's talking about which karma ripens first. Was it in general or was it in terms of rebirth? That's usually spoken of in terms of rebirth. Yeah, but, you know, you can see that it might happen in general too. Oh, but one thing about talking about karma is sometimes when the ripening of one karma impedes the ripening of another one. So for example, we may have many seeds in our mind stream to be born as animals or to be born as devas, but because now we're experiencing the ripening of the karma to be born as human beings, those other karmas cannot ripen right now as long as this life is happening. Okay, they're kind of on hold. They're not destroyed. At the time this life ends, one of them could ripen. But temporarily, you know, they can't. So there's all these, you know, nuances in karma, factors that can encourage things to ripen or discourage things from ripening. Yeah?
I remember in Pennsylvania, Big Woodstock,
Mm-hmm.
he spoke very specifically about karma often being used too widely,
Mm-hmm.
and that karma was more specifically the karma of the 12 links. I don't know, could you just elaborate on the difference in the way of seeing karma
okay.
in our tradition? And
Okay, let's clear up what he was saying. There's the meditation on karma and its effects, and karma just means action, okay? And when we're talking about the virtuous or non-virtuous actions, we have 4 parts to them, right? The object, the intention, the action, and the completion. Yeah. For one of these karmas to cause a rebirth, all four of those parts have to be intact. Okay. Now, but it's possible to create karma where only one factor is present, or two or three are present. Sometimes we might even have all four factors present, but still the intention was weak, the action wasn't very much. It still doesn't have the power to propel a rebirth. Yeah. When we talk about karma in the context of the 12 links, which was what his talk was about, then the second link, karma, is referring specifically to the karma that has the power to propel rebirth. Okay? So that doesn't mean all karma in general. Yeah? That karma that's the 12 links, actually the term is samsara, which means conditioning factor. Yeah? Yeah, so that conditioning factor, or sometimes they call it formative action or volitional formations, there's all sorts of different translations for it. That refers to a karma that has the power to propel a rebirth. But not all karma has to be that karma of the second link. There's many, many other kinds of karma. Okay, so karma is very broad, but when you're talking about that link, it's referring to something specific. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah.
I feel like it's sort of a half question, but it's Yeshi Venkatecha, when he was here, was talking about when you practice sincerely and you practice purely, then things kind of speed up. Like things can happen in your life that have to do with purifying. What's happening with karma there?
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so sometimes when you're practicing the Dharma, because you're purifying a lot, then it can speed things up in the sense that sometimes negative karma might ripen quickly and be done with. So it's kind of like, you know how sometimes if you take, what do you call it, Ayurvedic medicine, or some of the natural medicines, when you take it, it's medicine, but often you get sick before you get worse before you get better, because it's making all the junk in your system come out. But then once that junk comes out, then you recover. So I think it's a similar kind of thing here. Sometimes when we're practicing the Dharma, it's making different, negative seeds. Well, the seeds themselves aren't virtuous. Seeds of negativity, ripen. But then once they're ripened, they're done with. They're finished. They're over. That's actually another thing I should mention, is the seeds of the karma themselves are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Yeah, there's the seed of a virtuous karma and there's a seed of a non-virtuous karma, but the seed itself is neither. Okay? Another little interesting tidbit there. Dallas, you had?
Yes. Recently, Venerable, you were talking about when we're craving pleasure.
Uh-huh.
So I was thinking about the word pleasure, and I was wondering how it's different than feeling contented or even happy.
Okay.
Because those words kind of get
Okay. So I was talking about craving pleasure, and you're asking how is pleasure different from happiness, different from contentment. The Sanskrit word there is sukha. Yeah, sukha can be translated as pleasure, as happiness, as joy, as bliss. Yeah, so the word sukha covers a vast range of feelings that are all on the plus side. Okay? So it's our English words that where we have to think about what's the difference between them. Yeah. So I could have easily said, craving for happiness as craving for pleasure. Yeah. Well, because you thought you were beyond it, huh? Because pleasure is just what all these people who are into sense objects do, but happiness is different.
No, I didn't think that at all.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
What all the teachers talk about, including you, is that it's just normal as a human being to want happiness.
Yes.
And so a Buddha is happy.
Yeah, right. A Buddha's happy. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with happiness, and there's nothing wrong with pleasure. The problem is craving for it. You see? Okay. The where we get stuck is not the experience of pleasure and happiness. We can't control that anyway. Something happens, and the interaction of our our consciousness and our sense organs and the object, and the contact of those three, and then pleasure comes. That's something we can't control. That's something that's a product of previous karma. Okay, but how we react to the happy or unhappy feeling, how we react to the pleasure and pain, that's the thing that's important. Okay, so when we're craving for pleasure, the craving is what gets us messed up, not the pleasure, not the happiness. Everybody wants to be happy. Looking for happiness, nothing wrong with looking for happiness. Okay, when we're practicing the Dharma because we're looking for happiness, aren't we? What's the difference between looking for happiness and craving happiness? There's a big difference, because craving is completely diluted. Craving thinks the happiness means it's in the object and I have to get that object to be happy. But we can be looking for happiness, and what we're looking for is what are the causes of happiness. And then we go about creating them by engaging in wholesome activities. Okay, so looking for happiness through, in the sense of what are the causes of happiness, how can I create those causes? Whether it's the happiness of a good future rebirth, the happiness of liberation, the happiness of enlightenment, looking for those kinds of causes for happiness, fine. Looking for happiness in external things is craving happiness. And that comes from a distorted mind that is grasping at inherent existence. And that's totally misperceiving the object. Okay? So happiness is not the problem, it's the craving. And wanting to be happy is not the problem. Okay? We all want to be happy, but we often, in our attempt to be happy, because we're ignorant, we create the causes of suffering instead of the causes of happiness. And that's because we start craving happiness, craving pleasure. Okay? Because craving leads us to do all... Well, craving makes us miserable right now, doesn't it? Because when your mind's in a very intense state of craving, it's so painful, isn't it? It's really awful. And then when we act on the state of craving, we act on the craving and we try and satisfy the craving, then we wind up doing all sorts of negative actions, out of an incredibly self-centered motivation. So that's, where the problem comes. Okay? Yeah. So don't go thinking that happiness is a problem or that happiness is non-virtue. That's like thinking it's very interesting how our mind works. We project moral significance onto things that have no moral significance. And things that do have moral significance, we totally space out on and we don't even think about it. Okay? So we'll think pleasure is bad, we'll think our body is bad. Neither one of them are bad, neither one of them are non-virtuous. Okay? But lying and talking behind other people's back, do we ever consider that bad or non-virtuous? No, that's just pragmatic. You know, that's how to look out for ourselves. You got to do that to do good business. Oh, no, there's one, before we stop karma, I know we've gone way over time, but I wanted to tell you one story, okay? Because it was such a good illustration of karma. So there was something in the news about this guy who he was 30-something, and he was having all sorts of financial problems, and his business was having a lot of trouble, and, you know, and his marital problems and everything else. And so what he did is he was a pilot, so he had a little plane, you know. So he got in this plane, and he flew, and then when he was over Alabama, he sent out an SOS. He radioed down and said, you know, that the cockpit window, you know, blew in and it cut me, and, you know, and so then the advisors, what do you call them, the flight, the air traffic people, they said, we'll just try and land the plane, you know. But he didn't. What he did is he parachuted out. And then the plane went and it crashed somewhere in Florida, you know. And then they couldn't find this guy. Yeah. They finally found him, you know, they found him somewhere. What he had done is the whole SOS thing was a total ruse. What he was trying to do was, you know, it was like there was the ripening of karma in terms of the bad business and marital problems and everything. And rather than deal with the situation, he was attempting to exit, you know, by just getting lost in the country somewhere, because he had hit a motorcycle in some storage unit in Alabama that he was going to get, you know? And he was just going to disappear and then not deal with the situation. So the reason I thought to tell you this was, I mean, aside from it being a situation that requires compassion, but, you know, this is such an example of how we deal with the ripening of our negative karma, okay? We don't like it, do we? You know, we created the causes, you know, whether it's in a previous life or whether it's earlier this life and from doing bad actions earlier this life and now it ripens on us, or making stupid decisions and it's ripening. Instead of facing it and dealing with it, okay, and then letting it go, then we try and avoid the whole thing, and in the process create a ton more negative karma. Because now he not only has the lawsuits about his failing business, but he has a federal lawsuit about, you know, this whole ruse that he projected, and then also the damage he caused to other people's property by crashing his plane there. You know, plus he's injured too, and his mind is like super confused. So it's like I heard this story and it was like, boy, what an illustration of how we deal with suffering and how we deal with the ripening of negative karma, you know, and how we just try and avoid our responsibility instead of saying, I'm having this problem because of my own bad decisions this life and because of negative karma I've created in a previous life. And so now I'm going to deal with it honestly and fairly and clean it up and not get angry and not be greedy. And if we do that, then the whole thing finishes, doesn't it? But when we're in our reactive mode and we don't want to see anything that talks of pain, then we create the cause for more pain. Yeah, and it's sad, isn't it? It's very sad. So I thought to use that as an example of karma. Good one, isn't it? You know? Okay.